When it comes to Zack Snyder films, I like and do not like. There's a vast array of content that I think is excellent. I do like some of his Snyderverse, Batman vs Superman, director's cut, even The Man of Steel I thought was excellent. And then you get films like Sucker Punch. When Mr. Snyder came out with this new title, The Rebel Moon, he wanted to do a comic, an anime, multiple series, and was calling this his Star Wars. So I was excited to see what he was going to do with it, because stylistically he's always been excellent. You know, visually it's always been really fun to see what he would bring out. Story-wise, it's a bit mixed, and when it comes to part one, I had mixed feelings with it. I enjoyed it for what it was. I thought the action was good, but the story was a bit all over the place, and I didn't really care for the characters that much, because when we did get character development, it was exposition on a certain amount of them, but really was this team that we knew next to nothing about. So going into part two, Rebel Moon, Scargiver, I had misgivings or trepidation about what we were in store for. So let's talk about it. Korra and surviving warriors prepare to defend Velt, their new home, alongside its people against the realm. The warriors face their past, revealing their motivations before the realm's forces arrive to crush the growing rebellion. So I'm just going to break up this review and do it by section, because I think it's the easiest way to kind of talk about this part in particular. As far as to say, this film is Slow-Mo the movie, or Farming Simulator the movie, or Exposition the movie. That's kind of what you get for the first half of the movie, maybe almost 3/4. That's what you get. So let's talk about the cinematography, which I thought was excellent. Visually, it looks very pleasing to the eye. Beautiful combined slow-mo music effect. That cinematography, those shots, it feels like it could be the longest MTV music video. Beautiful to look at, lots of slow-mo, beautiful action choreographed scenes in slow-mo. All of that works well for the cinematography. Like when it comes to the color palette, all of that works well for the cinematography. I don't know how many times I can say cinematography, and if I keep saying it, maybe you guys will agree with me that
the cinematography in this
was great, and I think it was. When it comes to the story, there's a lot of Star Wars references. So when he was talking about that, this being his Star Wars movie, his opus to the Star Wars realm, I get it. We have like the lightsaber swords, and the sword play in this is okay. I preferred the sword play in the first one. We are given a lot of exposition as to the backgrounds of our characters, literally sitting around the table and them all giving their motivation for being there in that battle whilst everybody is farming. And when I say farming, the first 30 minutes of this story is all farming. Slow-mo wheat cutting, slow-mo trench building, slow-mo everything, slow-mo walking, slow-mo picking up weapons, slow-mo drinking water. That's what you get in this. And I thought it was bad in the first one, but this one it feels like they've doubled down on that. So first half an hour of the story is village. There is a motivation beat behind them farming, but it seems like they wasted a lot of time on the run hour of 2 hours, which is short for Zack Snyder to give us like all of that kind of background and exposition of stories. And then we get those short kind of cutaways, which I enjoyed, but it was narrated by each character, so then doing exposition as well. So it was there sort of flashbacks of kind of making us emotionally entangled to the characters, except it never really did that. It just felt like it was changing up the pace and not really drawing me into the motivations of the character, emotionally speaking, so that when eventually a few of our characters do die, of course that's the way to do it, you're meant to care, and I felt myself caring more for characters that weren't on screen that much than the ones that we were shown with that background story. When it comes to the acting, I think they're only as good as the dialogue they're given, and some of the dialogue in this is atrocious, like just no joke. I don't understand what they were thinking. The embellishment of the fantastical nature of the dialogue doesn't seem to fit the story of the farmer work, or even some of the dialogue or words that they used didn't seem to make sense for where they were. Attributing some sort of Viking word speaking like stop when you're when you're like chasing for a drink. That would be on our Earth during many years ago, and we still use it today. But are we then saying that this our simulation of Earth has been around some time, this is a long time in the future, and we're still speaking? Like, my mind spirals with questions like, where is this situation? And that's kind of what I feel like when it comes to the acting. Their motivations are scripted tightly with the dialogue they're given. They can only act as to what they've been given scope to act in. This is your character, this is kind of how you got to do it. Please be stoic and non-emotional on your face as one character. Mostly you're going to do forlorn looks and look to the side, or act a little bit emotional, a little bit of a lip wobble for when there's an emotional moment, and then go back to being the stoic warrior. I didn't really get to see behind the scenes of any of the characters. In fact, the one that I felt more emotionally connected to was the robot, who shows no emotion on the face, and the robot that we see less of, but when we do, you kind of like, yeah, that's very cool. In fact, there were side characters behind the scenes that were extras almost, that had a little bit of scenes that I was more connected to than our main superhero cast. The pacing is heavily created by the slow-mo. So when we have that half an hour simulator, like the farming simulator story, and we get so much of the slow-mo, it does actually feel like an MTV music video, especially with that score coming in. And it's all beautiful to look at in that slow-mo, but I found myself sighing so much, going, what is the purpose of this? Like, how much of this do you want me to sit through? And that continues throughout the movie, that sort of MTV pacing. I was just shaking my head, because the last half an hour of this movie is what I wanted from this movie. And that's the only reason why I'm going to give it any marks, is because the last half an hour of this movie, the action was quite creative. We've seen it before. I wouldn't say that we've seen like this is like absolutely fresh, but there is a great action sequence on a ship that I thought was intense enough. Everything on the ship I actually thought was filmed really well and had an intense driving force and motivation for moving the story and the plot forward. That all was good. And the chaos that ensued on the ground battle below was marred by the amount of slow motion that we were seeing in the action. There wasn't really time for us to really feel like we were in the battle, because so much of it was slow that we were forced to understand what was going on, what was happening. I would have liked a good chunk of action that was just fast and frenetic and allowed us to see what battle actually looks like. Laser beams going everywhere, sword fighting, crying, people dying left, right and center, battle, rather than this choreographed kind of moments of everybody flying in slow-mo, or rockets not quite hitting people, or a person being sliced in the throat but not actually having any blood, or a line across their throat and then kicked. It just felt bitsy. It felt like this was maybe dumbed down for a wider audience group so that everybody could watch it. I actually preferred the first half. There was a fantastical element of it. There was a journey that our characters were going on, and now we are situated on one planet and a ship, mostly on this planet of farmers, and we've seen that before in the first film. So it feels like they doubled down on what kind of didn't work in the first film and then gave us a nice action sequence at the end. From a guy who's been a journalist for many years, for someone who has a degree in television and film production, who's worked on shorts and TV ads and a couple of features, in no way am I saying I could do better. But I've come to see what grand scale, big budget can be. Dune being an example of really expert storytelling, visually dynamic and beautiful to look at, as well as giving us some emotional content there for us to care about what's happening when the action comes. For me, I was like, I can't get to the action fast enough, because that's the only reason why I'm still watching. So I'm going to give this 2 Nicolas Cages.
You got one.
And that's only because visually it looks great. Some of the action scenes we get for the last half an hour are awesome, but the rest I couldn't care less about. Let me know your thoughts and feelings. Did you like this one better? Did you think it was worse? What did you think about Zack Snyder films as a whole? Which is your favorite Zack Snyder film? I would probably go with either Man of Steel or the director's cut of The Watchmen. Thanks so much for watching, but most of all, until next time, remember, live long and Tuesday.